are these people?
We're gonna get a little darker. Oh man, this is. Why do they do this to me every week? Israel. What are we doing, guys? Now, I will say that thank Israel for introducing us to this incredible, brave writer over the last couple of weeks, Maryam Alaniz. She writes for Left Voice. She is a Columbia student. Last week, I read a letter that she wrote about her personal interactions and her hanging out with Mahmoud Khalil and what his abduction meant to her. It was really moving. She writes for Left Voice also. So this week, to recap, Israel, of course, has broken its ceasefire and has now started dropping bombs on families. And our news feeds, by the way, have started filling back up with dead kids and bleeding kids and crying parents holding maimed children, crying why. And this is on Trump. This is on Netanyahu. They are owning it. They're not ashamed of it.
Who are these people?
Thank you, Kate. Hey. I really appreciate that. And it's
Kate. Please don't let it go darker, she says.
Oh boy.
Well, I wish I could like oblige.
I do, but no, this one's viewer discretion is advised, I would say here.
Advised. Yeah.
Because first of all, Israel has broken its ceasefire and unleashed a new wave of violence on Gaza. The first night, they launched new attacks, killing over 400 Palestinians, breaking the already fragile ceasefire. Their relentless massacre makes it clear that its goal is the continued destruction of Palestine, that it was never about the hostages, and there's even conversation about the hostages' families suing Israel about not working to get them home.
Correct.
Right?
Amongst other things.
So look at that.
Mm-hmm.
That's somebody's home. Somebody's living in there now. Because that's what's
and
left.
They probably booby-trapped that rubble on top of that. So
that's all that's left. And now they started dropping bombs on that. So Maryam writes that at least 400 Palestinians have been killed in Israel's latest assault on Gaza, with the death toll continuing to rise. And again, this was on Monday. This is the largest escalation since the ceasefire with Hamas was brokered on January 19th. Okay. Israel has committed numerous violations since then, including hindering essential aid and obstructing medical evacuations. The Gaza government media office reported 265 such breaches as of February 12th, with 118 Palestinians killed during the period.
Israel fat Al-Arir tweet about ceasefire.
No, but it's that everyone, the Palestinians cease and Israel fires.
Correct.
Israeli
members.
Israeli for R.I.P. Rafat, man.
Yeah, dude.
You just got me. Israeli forces also unleashed a new wave of attacks on West Bank following the brokering of the ceasefire, with the ongoing military operation displacing over 40,000 Palestinians, as we reported last week, and killing hundreds over the last 2 months. About the current assault on Gaza, Israeli officials claim they're targeting Hamas operatives, a narrative parroted, of course, by mainstream media, but the reality is clear. This is a continuation of a genocidal policy that's already slaughtered almost 50,000 people, including children, journalists, families seeking refuge, and what little remains of Gaza's shattered landscape. The same state that bombed refugee camps and obliterated entire neighborhoods and targeted media offices now expects the world to believe its rhetoric of precision strikes. These renewed attacks real precise. Though they precisely are destroying everything in their path. These renewed attacks come amid the already dire humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The blockade, coupled with relentless airstrikes, has left the enclaves what formerly was 2.3 million, but even Trump admits is now 1.8 million residents in a state of perpetual fear and deprivation. The suspension of essential goods, including food, medicine, and fuel, has intensified the suffering of a population already on the brink. And all we have to do is look at the Substack chat for the Dissident to look at all the begging posts from all the Palestinians and the GoFundMes. It's absolutely beyond heartbreaking to see all of these people begging. And no way, I mean, there's no way that everyone can possibly help all these people.
No.
They also arrive in the context of U.S. airstrikes on Yemen and ongoing negotiations for what would have been the second phase of a ceasefire deal. But of course, we reported 6 weeks ago, there was never really a plan to execute the second part of that deal. It was all a ruse.
No.
The proposed
from the jump.
Yep.
He tried to tell people.
The proposed agreement would have seen Israel hypothetically committing to a permanent ceasefire in exchange for Hamas releasing the remaining living male hostages, both civilians and soldiers, in return for Palestinian prisoners, and they always omit that part. Far from taking steps toward peace, Israel has chosen more bloodshed, demonstrating once again that its goal is not security, but the continued destruction of Gaza, West Bank, and all of Palestine. Ceasefire talks were already on fragile ground. That's a nice way to say so. Before this latest round of bombings, the first phase was precarious at best, reflecting deep contradictions within Israel's political and military establishment. Netanyahu, despite wielding some of the most advanced weaponry in the world, failed to retrieve all hostages or completely eliminate Hamas as it would have liked to. And again, almost a year ago, I reported with you here on this show that Dave DeCamp from Anti-War had reported from the U.S. military that they're never getting rid of Hamas. Hamas is never going away, and what they've done here only solidifies a new generation of Hamas. As many as you kill, you've created another generation of Hamas worldwide on top of all of it, outside of Israel. So, even with Netanyahu's temporary political maneuvers, his inability to achieve decisive military success has complicated the second phase of the ceasefire, which involves negotiating who would govern Gaza in a situation where Hamas maintains its control. Again, there was never any intent for that. So that was a ruse. That was a, yeah, we'll get to that when we get to it. Just give us our first thing now. Right? There was never a plan for that. And again, a year ago, the Ynet article laid out the Gaza 2020-35 plan, not 2020, but 2035, which was that it would be a Dubai-like independent type of state that would be managed by a coalition of Israel and Saudi Arabia and a lot of the Abraham Accord nations, but primarily by Israel, and Israeli military would never leave. That was also part of it. All right. Meanwhile, back in the Hall of Injustice. Come on. I'm waiting.
You're waiting? Meanwhile, enter. No, without a space. And then.
Meanwhile, at the Legion of Doom.
Thank you. Donald Trump, who certainly is the second or third in charge at the Legion of Doom behind Netanyahu and Miriam Adelson and maybe Peter Thiel, has openly embraced Israel's project of ethnic cleansing, declaring his desire to turn Gaza into a Riviera. His words lay bare the true agenda of Zionist expansion, the erasure of Palestinian existence. The Trump administration's reactionary policies are not only politically aiding Israel's far-right coalition, but also attempting to crush the growing global movement for Palestinian liberation. From criminalizing protesters to the attempted deportation of her friend, Palestinian activist Mahmoud Khalil, Trump and his allies within the universities were doing everything they can to silence those who stand in solidarity with Palestine. And we're going to talk about that next again. History has shown that as long as there's oppression in Palestine, there will be resistance. Even resistance!
Yep.
The world cannot remain silent as Israel escalates its campaign of terror. Yes, they are terrorists, nor can it accept Trump's campaign of repression. Yes, he is repressing and also terrorizing Venezuelans, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. The spirit of the youth and workers who rose up last year in defense of Palestine must be revived. Even such. I'm sorry to kind of make levity, but I have to laugh at something here.
Yeah, we need it.
Zionism and imperialism have an insatiable appetite for violence, which must be put in check by the historic movement for Palestinian liberation. And I remember, and I'll never forget, one of the things that they do is they want to smile whenever they're being arrested. All right? Maryam, like she says, is a socialist journalist, activist, and a PhD student living in New York City. She's an editor for the international section of Left Voice. Follow her on Twitter. She's a badass. I'm a fan. I love her writing. Love to have her on sometime, have a conversation with her. This is the third or fourth week in a row that we've covered some of her stuff from Columbia University. Big fan. I also wanted to go to an actual Palestinian because I think we did that last week as well. And I think that it's really important to bring Palestinian voices to the show as well. And yeah, it's going to be dark and depressing. I'm really sorry. But we need to hear this too. All right. This is literally somebody, Dalia Abu Ramadan. Okay. Again, the day after the ceasefire had ended, and the day after Maryam had written her article, Israel's bombs rained down at 2 a.m., killing hundreds around me in Gaza. The ceasefire was still difficult, but we believed we would wake up alive. Now Israel has taken even that away from us. So again, while we sit in comfortable United States watching this on YouTube, there are people like that are literally dealing with this right now, and we have to think about, and I don't want to be ignorant of their perspectives and views. Okay, so again, this is an image from Getty Images. People search for survivors in the rubble of a building destroyed in an overnight Israeli military strike in Jabalia in the northern Gaza Strip last night. Last night. I was jolted awake at 2 a.m. this morning by the deafening sound of explosions and relentless bombardment here in the Rimal neighborhood in Gaza where I live. The noise was so overwhelming I couldn't tell where it was coming from. I was in a deep sleep, as I am every night, worn out by the constant anguish we live through. There's no life for us, only survival in the temporary silence of a ceasefire. During the ceasefire, we struggled still to eat, to keep breathing, to find shelter. At least we could rest for a moment, believing we might wake up alive and not to the sound of missiles and blasts. But then something changed. What had happened? During the 2 a.m. bombardment, the earth itself seemed to shake under the force of each blast. Fear gripped my heart, and my family and I scrambled to make sense of the chaos. What was happening? We were paralyzed by the shock, as if we were reliving the horror of war all over again. We couldn't believe it. Had the war truly returned? In disbelief, we reached out to friends and turned on the news, desperate for answers. The response was clear. Yes, the Israeli military's airstrikes had resumed, raining down across Gaza from north to south. Death has returned like a shadow that followed us. Today is not October 7th, but this is the same nightmare in a different moment, a different hour, a different year. New questions haunt us. Will this nightmare stretch beyond a year like the war did before this broken ceasefire? Or will we be consumed from the very beginning? Will this Ramadan mirror be the one we barely survived? Will it bring more sorrow, more despair as we find ourselves trapped in a cycle that refuses to end? In the midst of these terrifying moments, my mind drifts back to the previous Ramadan. How we lived each day as if it were our last, constantly bracing ourselves for the worst. Despite the temporary nature of the recent ceasefire and the grim conditions of destruction, blockade, and famine, this year I had a glimmer of hope. Now, with the brutal return of genocide, my feelings of despair have deepened. Even before last night's bombardment, again, this is parts of the Ramal neighborhood, were already reduced to rubble. The author took this photo the day before the latest bombings. Look, there was a whole structure actually intact. Wonder if it still is. I wonder, where will I escape this time? Who will I lose? Will I ever get to graduate with my bachelor's degree in English translation from the Islamic University of Gaza, which they destroyed? The war and siege have delayed my graduation, but I've never stopped learning or writing, even as everything has been postponed because of the war. Even as I write these words, the sound of explosions reverberates, amplifying my anxiety and fear. Wow, listen to that. I turned 22 during the war on February 9th last year, and turned 23 last month during the ceasefire. Unfortunately, with every passing year, I feel like I'm living a tragedy. How many more years will we grow older while only surviving Israel's wars on us? With every year, that adds another number to my age. I remember the wars I've lived through, enduring both Ramadan and Eid under the shadow of destruction. Even as I write these words, like he says, the sound of explosions reverberate, amplifying my anxiety and fear. The war that I survived in 2014 lasted for 51 days. I was just 12 years old, but I was fully aware that we were living through genocide. The Israeli military completely destroyed the Shujaiya neighborhood of Gaza. In 2018 and 19, many other escalations occurred, and the security situation in Gaza was unstable, especially along the borders where many innocent people were killed, including protesters demanding an end to Israel's blockade and their right to return to their ancestral homes. Then in 2021, as I was preparing for my university exams, the Israeli military rained destruction on Gaza for 11 days. It was in May. It was one of the hardest wars I've ever lived through. Israel deployed weapons it never used before. The war also marked the beginning of the use of fire belts, an Israeli tactic in which a warplane pummels a single location with many missiles. The war reached its peak during Eid al-Fitr, and it was a terrifying time, especially since I had become more aware of the horrors around me. I remember my friend Zainab al-Kulok, who lived on al-Wahed al-Wehda Street in Ramal neighborhood, lost her mother and her sisters and also her brother. Her story was heartbreaking. On that same street she lived, the Abu al-Auf family was struck by a fire belt, and some of its members were killed, and that war ended, but little did we know the worst was yet to come. In the October 7th war, the Israeli military's use of fire belts advanced to the point where an entire neighborhood could be wiped out. The war was not just confined to one area. It was a war across all of Gaza. In 2024, we also lived through Ramadan and Eid in the middle of war. I remember desperately needing to leave the house on the first day of Eid. As I walked down the street in my neighborhood, I saw a house completely demolished with a message written in black pen on its wall. I know you can hear me, wishing you all the best every year. I asked some neighbors who hadn't evacuated about it, and they told me that a young man had lost his entire family and they were still buried under the rubble. He wrote that message because he was completely alone. I had hoped that we'd make it through Ramadan in relative peace under the fragile ceasefire, but it's become painfully clear this nightmare from October 7th, which has never truly ended, has returned with its full force. The terror, the destruction, the uncertainty, it's back, relentless and unforgiving. The war has come back stronger than ever before. It's erupted again at 2 a.m., and by morning, the Israeli military had murdered more than 400 people in Gaza, including many children. In those terrible hours, lives were shattered, futures obliterated, and unimaginable horror unfolding once again. The numbers, the loss, it's more than any soul can endure. We haven't even begun to recover from all the wars that came before. Like many, Zainab have been left shattered and their lives forever altered. They can never get that back. And then there are all those families, at least 1,200 of them, as I talked about last week, who have been erased entirely, wiped off the map. Their names no longer etched even in history. Not a single soul remains. One of them, I believe, had over 50 members. Today, on March 18th, the Zain al-Din family was erased too, destroyed by the return of the genocide, as the nightmare continues to claim everything in its path. We held on to the hope that the ceasefire would last, desperate for a moment of peace, a chance to wake up to calm despite the internal struggles and the obstacles we face as a result of this war. But how much longer must we live through this endless cycle of violence? How many more years will we carry the weight of this war on our shoulders? Will Gaza ever know peace, or will refuge from endless war only echo in the stillness of death? And that's literally what a Palestinian is feeling right now and what they're going through and their perspective. And it's the fucking worst. And our government is doing that. We're doing that.
Are we the baddies?
We are. And Truthout.
I hate these guys.
Truthout is a good independent outlet. They have some TDS, but they're reporting these kinds of perspectives and they need to be supported. Support independent media. They are an Indie Media Award honoree from class of 2022 for one of the best outlets out there. And again, just heartbreaking to hear the perspective of, and to literally hear the voices from the people that it's happening to in real time. And I think it's important to not, to not leave them out of the conversation, because a lot of channels won't really cover what Palestinians are saying. They'll just kind of cover what American podcasters and American commentators and maybe Netanyahu and maybe a couple of other people are saying about it, but they're not really giving that voice, and it's painful. It really is.
Shout out to the EI too, who does an incredible job doing
Electronic
that.
Intifada, also Indie Media Award honorees, right. Absolutely. Nora Barrows-Friedman and Ali Abu Nima and Asa Winstanley and John Elmer, the whole crew over there, man. They do amazing work.
And if you go look at their website, it's nothing but actual Palestinian journalists, practically. So,
yep.
We'll give that a shout.
I want to continue, and I brought this video, and this also was from Monday night.
Nicole Jeans.
What's her name? Yes.
Nicole Genese.
Nicole Genese.
Hi, Chifachi.
She says, happening right now, Israel is butchering children and innocents in Gaza again. Funded by USA, as served as democracy and making America great again with children's blood. This is madness and war crimes, pure terrorism. So let's hear 3 minutes and 8 seconds of what she has to say.
So imagine this, 2 in the morning, 18th of March of 2025. You're sleeping in a tent, probably hungry, sleeping on the ground and tired, maybe scared. after almost 2 years of killing and persecuting and genocide. And out of the sudden, you wake up to this hell. You see, maybe you're used to, from your privilege of seeing it on social media. And then you see this image. Can you imagine? Was a healthy kid like an hour back. Then you see this one. Yeah, they're dead. And you know something? While you're spilling your latte in shock, your money is funding this. Your cycle of politicians from USA and Europe, they are funding this. This just happened. They were alive an hour back. While your president is putting the cap of making America great again by bombing all the countries around. Why they're bombing Yemen, for example? Because they must allow Israel to do this. They are defending national security. They are a threat for you? 1 hour back they were alive. 1 hour back they didn't have the wounds. Is this the threat to your democracy, USA and Israel, your biggest ally? 1 hour back. 1 hour back. You see what you achieved with your democracy and with your homeland security, thousands and thousands and thousands of kilometers away? You see what you're funding? Do you see what the criminal state, fake state of Israel is doing to children? Just go on all the social media that are allowing such things, such images, X for example, and you will see plenty. And how about you, journalists? BBC, CNN. Be careful with that pin of free press. It might pinch your heart because it's just a fashion statement for you. Because this blood is on all your hands. The press is free. Where is the free press? Where is the freedom that you're bragging about? Maybe I'm not supposed to say it, but for all the leaders of the world, I would love to give you flowers right now, just to replace the oxygen that you're wasting. If you're not a coward like the majority of the world, just raise your voice, because those could be your children. Those could be your families, because by the rate of the violence that the world is going into right now, it's not gonna be too far to reach all of us. At least for that reason, do it if you don't have humanity.
Yeah. Well,
yep.
I got nothing that I can add there.
She's I know I've covered her sending clothes and aid directly into Gaza. So
she kind of nails it.
Good lady, that. Respect to the Romanian women out there. So
yep. Audio visual
they gotta
producer,
deal with men
actress.
like Andrew Tate.
Yep. She's great. Okay. Next. Another Indie Media Award honoree. And again, I don't want to read through the whole thing, but the headline is enough considering what we've just watched for the last half hour-ish. Israel's assault marks one of the deadliest days for children in Gaza's history. Again, look at that image. That was Tuesday. At least 174 children were killed in the ceasefire, making it one of the deadliest 24 hours for children in Gaza's history. Thanks, Israel. Another record claimed. 400 dead, 500 wounded, according to health officials. And of course, we know what's happened to the health system there. So it's probably way more than that. How many more are under buildings now that we still don't know about? All right. This guy, Rami Abdu, his sister's entire family, including her 3 children, were among killed. All right. It's just... All right. And we got story after story after story. But here's the one that I wanted to bring, and I got one other one after this, I think, maybe two. Our friend the Dissident, all right, reports that an Israeli paper recently revealed that Netanyahu called for war crimes to be committed. Now, he's already been indicted by the ICJ for war crimes, which we know he will never actually be held to account. Unfortunately, he should be. He should sit and rot the rest of his life in The Hague. I didn't want to look at his bald head, let alone the rest of it.
That'd be way too good for him.
All right. But the Dissident writes that the Zionists have long defended Israel's war crimes against civilians in Gaza based on the absurd claims that they were all due to Hamas using civilians as human shields, let alone the videos that we've literally seen of Israelis using Palestinians strapped to the hood of a vehicle as a human shield.
Thank you. In Lukash is a whole article. Go read it.
Over at Mint Press. A look at the data shows that this is complete nonsense, and the data shows that 9 out of every 10 people killed in Gaza are civilians, and that 70% of the people killed in Israel in Gaza are women and children. This, coupled with the endless genocidal statements made by Israeli officials, show that they are indeed deliberately targeting civilians. However, there has been a recent bombshell proving that Netanyahu indeed called to target civilians in Gaza. Buried in a lengthy piece written in Hebrew in the Israeli paper Ynet, we referenced Ynet in their Gaza 2035 plan, it was revealed that Netanyahu explicitly said he does not care about goals in Gaza and called to take down houses and bomb with everything there is. Here we go. It was reported that by the paper, quote, when Halevi, who was the General Chief of Staff of the IDF, presented the cabinet with the IDF's actions for the first 48 hours of the war, he noted that the Air Force had attacked 1,500 targets in Gaza. It's a huge number, which requires exceptional intelligence and operational capabilities. Netanyahu erupted in anger, shouting and banging on the table, "Why not 5,000? He slammed the chief of staff. "I don't care about goals. Take down houses, bomb with everything there is." Motherfucker. Monster.
Benjamin Netanyahu?
All right. This proves that Netanyahu explicitly did not have a military goal when launching the genocide in Gaza and actively called to bomb houses and indiscriminately bomb with everything there is in Gaza. This stunning proof of intent to commit war crimes and genocide will certainly bolster the ICC's war crimes court against Netanyahu and the ICJ's genocide case brought by South Africa. As if either one of them matters. They're never going to be held to account for those. There's been ample evidence of the Israeli security forces deliberately targeting civilians, on top of them admitting it. Feroz Sidwa, a volunteer doctor who has worked with a surgeon in Ukraine, Haiti, Burkina Faso, worked as a surgeon in Ukraine, Haiti, Burkina Faso, and Ghana, testified that while he was in Gaza, quote, nearly every day I was there, I saw a new young child who had been shot in the head or the chest, virtually all of whom went on to die. And that wasn't by Hamas, that was by the IDF. He noted that after he had asked other healthcare workers, he had found that, quote, dozens were seeing the same thing, including Dr. Mark Perlmutter, who is currently unaccounted for the last 5 days, and Instagram has now shut down his account for reporting from Gaza. Since then, there have been 44 international healthcare workers in Gaza who've testified that they witnessed, quote, cases of preteens shot either in the head or in the chest. The recent UN report on Israel's use of sexual violence in Gaza found numerous examples of civilians being explicitly targeted. I think I might have mentioned that last week, or it was really too graphic to bring to the show.
Yeah.
The report noted that only 2 of the 12 potentially functioning hospitals previously offering sexual and reproductive health care were actually able to even provide such services because of direct attacks against the main maternity wards in Gaza from the IDF, where there was no credible information indicating that the buildings were used for military purposes. But again, they don't care. Their whole plan is first to destroy the healthcare system. Then they destroy the streets and roads so that you can't get sick people to the healthcare system that exists. Then society starts breaking down. The report also documented a deliberate attack in mid-November 2023 on a women's rights center working with survivors of gender-based violence, where IDF soldiers wrote, quote, "You sons of bitches, we came here to fuck you, you and your mothers, you bitches." End quote. "The dirty pussies of your prostitutes, you ugly Arab, you ugly, you sons of bitches. We will burn you alive, you dogs," unquote. In graffiti again, with no, quote, military justification for the ISF firing tank shells at this center.
Your continued existence is a mockery of morality.
Now, there is proof that Netanyahu went on record calling to indiscriminately kill civilians in Gaza without any care for a military goal, showing that the order to commit these crimes came right from the top. And I debate whether Netanyahu is actually even really the top, but that's okay. In order to take down houses and bomb everything there is without caring about goals is about as explicit of a call for war crimes and genocide as a statement we can get. Yes. And I think that Keir Starmer and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Donald Trump should also be equally implicated here, by the way. Because they're the ones that are arming, funding, and providing the spy flights overhead. Starmer is providing spy flights. Go check out Declassified UK to learn more about that. Since restarting the genocide in Gaza, Netanyahu has been killing more civilians than ever. The Israeli newspaper Haaretz called his recent assault on Gaza the largest child massacre in Israel's history, with 200 children and 100 women killed in one day and 400 civilians killed altogether.
Haaretz.
That's Haaretz, a conservative number given the fact that the number of dead is still not yet final. Now, Ynet has documented that Netanyahu is explicitly calling for these indiscriminate massacres in Gaza and has no actual military goal outside of the mass murder of civilians. His military goal is to steal the land and resources underneath it so that he can then build the Riviera and take the gas and the oil underneath it and build eventually the Ben Gurion Canal. That's the goal.
10-year-old kids sing.
That's the plan.
Fucking monsters.
And as Gladwin D'Souza points out, that it is happening with the murderous support and supply chain of the USA. Agreed, Gladwin. Okay.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
Now, I wanted to bring this image, and then I want to read one more piece. And this was from Norman Solomon, who I'm not usually a big fan of, but he happened to knock it out this time. This is a Getty image, another one, but oh my God. What is this description? What are we looking at? Okay. There is no place left for people to flee and set up their tents. They have been forced. That's weird. Move over there. They have been forced to pitch tents in a landfill next to piles of garbage near Al Yarmouk Stadium in Gaza. That is awful.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
So, let's get to genocide denial. And let's talk about those who do deny genocide. And I like this piece because I've talked a little bit with you, Reef, and some others about J Street and why there isn't. There's a lot of focus on AIPAC, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of focus on J Street. And it's really strange. All right. So The genocide denial of the pro-Israel, pro-peace crowd. Gaslighters. Norman Solomon again. The Israeli government has displayed clear and unequivocal genocidal intent. Continuing to arm them with U.S. weapons means full complicity in what they do with them. Totally agreed. So he writes, Israel's renewed assault on Gaza comes several months after both Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch issued reports concluding without equivocation that Israel was engaged in genocide, let alone the ICJ and the ICC. But very few members of Congress dare to acknowledge that reality, while their silence and denials scream out complicity. In a New York Times interview last weekend, the Senate's Democratic leader, Chuck Schumer, put deep moral evasion on display. Among the slogans that are used when criticizing Israel, he said, "The one that bothers me the most is genocide. Genocide is described as a country or some group that tries to wipe out a whole race of people, a whole nationality of people. So if Israel were not provoked and just invaded Gaza and shot at random Palestinians, Gazans, that would be genocide. That's not what happened."
They actively have been doing that for years.
That's exactly what happened.
What are you talking about?
Because it didn't just start October 7th, Chucky Schmucky.
What an idiot. Oh.
Schumer is wrong.
Idiots.
The International Genocide Convention defines genocide.
Stupid shit.
Forget about the fact that his definition is off, and that's what he's going to correct here. Schumer's wrong. The International Genocide Convention defines genocide as acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group, such as actions killing, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, and, quote, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. Such actions by Israel have been accompanied by clear evidence of genocidal intent, underscored by hundreds of statements by Israeli leaders and policy shapers. Scarcely 3 months into the Israeli war on Gaza, scholars Raz Segal and Penny Green pointed out a database compiled by the Law for Palestine Human Rights Organization meticulously documents and collates 500 statements that embody the Israeli state's intention to commit genocide and incitement to genocide since October 7, 2023. Those statements, quote, by people with command authority, state leaders, war cabinet ministers, and senior army officers, and by other politicians, army officers, journalists, and other public figures, reveal the widespread commitment in Israel to the genocidal destruction of Gaza. Since March 2nd, the UN reports, Israeli authorities have halted the entry of all life-saving supplies, including food, medicine, fuel, and cooking gas, for 2.1 million people. Again, Trump said it was 1.8. So 2.3, 2.1, 1.8. Hundreds of thousands dead is what I'm seeing here by the numbers.
Wrong.
Now, Israel's horrendous crusade to destroy Palestinian people in Gaza, using starvation as a weapon of war and inflicting massive bombardment on civilians, has resumed after a 2-month ceasefire, which wasn't really a ceasefire at all. They just stopped the bombing, but they never really stopped killing Palestinians or jailing Palestinians, rounding them up, and then not agreeing to the ceasefire agreements that it had agreed to. On Tuesday, children were among more than 400 people killed by Israeli airstrikes. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu proclaimed that this is only the beginning. Of course, we also know that if Netanyahu doesn't stop that if he stops it, he ends up going to trial and going to jail. It's almost impossible to find a Republican in Congress willing to criticize the pivotal U.S. backing for Israel's methodical killing of civilians. it's much easier to find GOP lawmakers who sound bloodthirsty. I will say that Marjorie Taylor Greene, among others, has been principled in not wanting to fund Israel. For a whole different reason, but I'll take it.
Mm-hmm.
A growing number of congressional Democrats, still way too few, have expressed opposition. In mid-November, 17 Senate Democrats and 2 independents voted against offensive arms sales to Israel. But in reality, precious few Democratic legislators really pushed to impede such weapons shipments until after last November's election. How convenient. Deference to President Biden was the norm as he actively enabled the genocide to continue. And I want to pause right there for a second because he notably said offensive arms sales to Israel, because that's a bullshit term that Bernie Sanders decided to create. Because there are no defensive weapons that are being sent to Israel. Give me a fucking break. They're all defensive. They're all offensive. Every single one of them. Iron Dome and all. It's all fucking offensive because it's all designed to annihilate the Palestinian people. Even if it's protecting Israelis, and the intent in the end is to annihilate the Palestinians. He says this week, the renewal of Israel's systematic massacres of Palestinian civilians has hardly sparked a congressional outcry. Silence or platitudes have been the usual. And here we go. For the pro-Israel, pro-peace J Street, and what a fucking contradiction that is, the largest and most influential liberal Zionist organization in the United States, evasions have remained along with expressions of anguish. On Tuesday, the group's founder and president, Jeremy Ben-Ami, issued a statement decrying the decision by Netanyahu to reignite this horrific war and calling for use of all possible leverage to pressure each side to restore the ceasefire, as if he's both sidesing the thing. But, as always, J Street did not call for the U.S. government to stop providing the weapons that make the horrific war possible. That's where the genocide denial comes in. For J Street, as for members of Congress who've kept voting to enable the carnage with the massive U.S. to Israel weapons pipeline, support for that pipeline requires pretending that genocide isn't really happening. While writing an article for The Nation, and the article is entitled, Has J Street Gone Along with Genocide? I combed through...
Yes, the answer is yes.
Yes. 132 news releases from J Street between early October 2023 and the start
that long, huh?
And the start of the now broken ceasefire, right? In late January of this year. I found that on the subject of whether Israel was committing genocide, J Street aligned itself completely with the position of the U.S. and Israeli governments. Nah. Go figure. J Street still maintains this position that it took last May when the International Court of Justice ordered Israel to halt its military offensive in Rafah. J Street continues to reject the allegation of genocide in this case, a news release said. It would be untenable to publicly acknowledge the reality of Israeli genocide while continuing to support shipping more weaponry for the genocide. That's why those who claim to be pro-peace, quote unquote, while supporting more weapons for war, must deny the reality of genocide in Gaza. Because otherwise, they would literally be guilty of war crimes under the ICJ. All right? And here is the TDS unconstitutional rampage begging for money. Right. All right. So this concludes finally our Fuck Israel portion of the program. And we're definitely not getting remonetized for stuff like that. So if you are able to, out of means, please, please. I hate begging and I hate doing this.
Money, please.
That one. We could use some help. Cash App, Ko-fi, PayPal. even Substack if you must, but please try to do one of the other three if you can. The reason being that they don't take very many fees. We end up with the most possible money. If you super chat on my channel, you are able to. YouTube takes 30%. If you Rumble rant, they take 50%. Now, you could Rumble subscribe to the channel, the little red button that says subscribe with the little red gift. They give us all of that. So that's cool. You can do that. But again, Cash App, ko-fi.com/Indie News Network, paypal.me/Indie News Network. And that worked. Use it this week. And thank you so much to Sean, and thank you so much to Kamishwari Kate, and thank you so much to Charlie Mack Friday night, and to Colin Care Bear, and everybody else that contributes. It's incredible. Thank you. It really helps, and it really helps, keeps us going. If you're able to, Cash App, $Indie News Network, ko-fi.com/Indie News Network, paypal.me/Indie News Network. That's with an IE. Support independent media. We need it more than ever. I love you all, and I'll see you next week. Thank you, everyone.
All people are afraid. No one knows what they're doing. Everything is getting worse. Some people deserve to die. Your money is worthless. No one is properly dressed. At least one of your children will disappoint you. The system is rigged. Your house will never be completely clean. All teachers are incompetent. There are people who really dislike you. Nothing is as good as it seems. Things don't last. No one is paying attention. The country is dying. God doesn't care. Shh.
Good night, everyone.
Ciao, baby.
No! We just fucking lost the stream!
Can't keep giving us nothing and think we're bluffing about coming for your heads. Why play civil if you won't listen to 50,000 dead? And now we know our mission, we form a militia, make Congress a prison. No, I play civil when all these dead won't make you listen. What's more American than slaying your oppressors? What's more American than liberty or death first? God, I thought we were founded on abolishing the tyranny of those who would starve a village all to live empirically. And I regret that I have only one life to give for my cause now that I can see the cause so clearly. See, I want our leaders, regardless of party, to fear me.